Okay, yesterday we had seen, we were discussing the Zman before and after Tishrei regarding the crops of Maisa, which year you go after. We saw different halachas, whether you go after the Hashrasha, when you go ahead and you plant it, that was by Tilson. We saw that by Tfuah and Zaysim, you go after when it grows a third of its growth. And we saw by trees, it goes after Chanata, you go after what? After its bloom. So the Gemara brought an instance where in a Shemitah year that goes into the 8th year, that we called it Sukkos, meaning that it's still Shemitah is not till Sukkos. And the assumption is that it's speaking about a crop that grew a third of its growth in the Shemitah year, and now you're cutting it in the 8th year. Since it grew a third of its crop in the 7th year, it's considered part of the Shemitah year, and therefore you can't use it. So that's what we saw. It has Kedusha Shemitah. That's what we saw yesterday. The Gemara said, and the Gemara brought a proof, but Chaga Asif, it's an extra word. So we said Asif must mean Kitsira, harvesting, rather than the name of the Yontif, because that we had Ba'aspacha, we had an extra word. We had Rav Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Zeira, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I don't know what that was, but whatever it was, it's gone. It sounds like an alien trying to contact the share, like, you know. Anyway, so we saw that the Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zeira, how's it possible that Chachamim knew? How's it possible they knew Shiurim? And Rabbi Zeira admonished him, don't go ahead and say such things, because we have a Gemara that they threw the guy out of the base medrash for that reason. Rabbi Yomi himself, in Gemara Chav Gimel and Baba Basra. So we gave instances where, for example, a mikvah is 40 sa. If you take off a minimal amount of a kurtiv, it's not a good mikvah. The share of transmit tumah of tefillas oichlin is a beitza. Kontasam Rishayim also the makabel tumah is shares a beitza. And we said if you take off a shum shemin, a sesame seed, it's not. Alakim the Rabbanan said. So in that now Rav Yirmiyah is going ahead and responding. That's where we're up to. We're up to Yud Gimel Amid Aleph. And Chad Amar Rav Yirmiyah. If you see the Taisvis Takrivu countdown there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down after that. Chad Amar Rav Yirmiyah Lav Milsi Dami. That I said that the Chamim are not exacted. How could they possibly know? Lav Milsi Dami. The boy Minei Chavrayim Merav Kana. The Chevri Esrav Kahana. Now, Bnei Yisrael, they crossed the Yarden on Yud. They had the Smil on Yud Aleph. They brought the carbon basis from Yud Dalid, and on Tez Zayin they ate from the new crop. Now, how did they do it? They mated the Chodesh through Ayidei bringing the Omer. The question is, the Mitzias, how is it possible to have Omer that's mechuyev in Ketzira to bring the carbon from? So, Im Taima, the Ayel Biyad Nachri, if you're going to tell me it ripened in the hand of a guy, they came into Eretz Yisrael. So what are you going to tell me? The ripened crop that ripened, the barley that ripened in the hands of a guy would be chayiv what? In Trumas for Ketzir that you could use for Ketzir Saimeh. The pasuk says, guys, Reishis Ketzirchem. It says Ketzirchem. Reishis Ketzirchem, the first of your cuttings. The key word being yours and not the guys. So the guys would not be mechuyev me. Amrachmana v'loy Ketzir Nachri and not the Ketzir v'Nachri. So how in the world could you go ahead and use that? So what must have happened? So the Gemara says, so it must be that it grew a third of its growth. How do you know that you'll makriv the oimer? Maybe they weren't makriv the oimer at all. Right? So in other words, we know that chodesh can be matter al yedei the day itself. Once the day passes, it's mutter. The chodesh is mutter. It says Gemara loy sal kedaitach. It says vayoklu me avo aretz. They ate from the land. What was in the land? Mimachras haPesach. From the day machras haPesach. Tezayin. Mimachras haPesach oichel on Tezayin they ate. Meikar loy oichel. But the first day they did. Before that they didn't eat. So you see, why didn't they eat? Must be because they brought the oimer. They brought the oimer and then they ate. So where exactly, if they bought the oimer, where they get the crop from? It couldn't be the crop that ripened in the hands of the goyim, because we said Reishis Ketzirchem. So therefore must be anything that not grow a third of its growth in the hands of a nachri. Okay, so what happened, guys? They came to Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't grow in it, and there was a crop there. It didn't grow in the hands of the Nachri, and while they were there, it finished a third of its growth. So since it's finished a third of its growth in the hands of the Jews, it's considered a Jewish crop that you can bring the Omer from. That's how you know a third of its growth. Again, and we're going to bring. We didn't finish the raya yet, but that's the beginning of the raya. That it can't be there wasn't ripened at all. So it must have been ripened up to a certain point, and that point where it ripened, the third of its growth was in the hand of a Jew. Therefore, I would be able to bring the omer from there, right? Vidilma, you'll say Vidilma ayav like kimlahu. What are you going to say that it ripened and they didn't know? If they didn't know, then how could they bring it? Ella Rav Yirmiyah's maida, Ella kimlahu. So hachanami kimlahu. So just like Rav Yirmiyah says over there, by the omer, they were able to ascertain that it grew a third in their rishos, who had been over here regarding the halacha of Shemitah, which year it grew in, whether it's Shemitah year or not the Shemitah year, they're able to do it. So Rav Yirmiyah said, that I said before, that how do they know? I clearly am incorrect, because I see from Ketsiras Omer, just like they knew over there, it's a third of its growth, so too over here, a third of its growth. They would know. Maybe it didn't go ahead and ripen at all. Maybe it didn't ripen at all. The Ayel River, right? Bein shlish lepachas shlish. Like Himlahu. In other words, you assume that it ripened up to a third. Maybe it didn't ripen at all. It didn't. And they're not, and if it didn't ripen at all, if it didn't ripen at all, then they won't be able to bring it. I say they said they brought it. What am I missing out over here? It says Rashi, v'dum lo yal klal. Bodku at shematzu mitfua actually is schila levashal klal umimenu heviu. Maybe they checked until it didn't ripen at all, and they brought it. How can you bring it from something that's not ripen? Well, klal bodku at shemolu mitfua at shematzu tfua actually hiskil levashal klal. Bodku at shematzu mitfua. Maybe they brought it. Maybe they brought that. Says the Gemara, the Isle River, let's say it grew a fourth of its growth, being shlish lepachas, mishlish lekim lahu. So let's talk about the chsiv. Va'am olum en ayardein be'esel l'chaydesh. V'yisal kedaitach lo ayal klal the chamish yume mi kamalya. If you tell me it wasn't ripe at all, how's it possible to ripen in 5 days? Elamadi going to say in other words, the Gemara's assumption is it didn't grow a third of its growth, it didn't ripen, and then they brought it. Says the Gemara, you have to bring it from ripened grain. If it didn't grow a third of its growth, how can they bring it at all? In 5 days, it's not going to grow. Elamai, the Isle River, that what are you going to tell me? It ripened the fourth, a dank or a sixth. Akati b'chemish yumi mikomalia. Elamai yischol. Maybe what do you have to say? Eretz tzri sivbei. It says Eretz tzri. Achnami Eretz tzri. No, guys, sivbei. Guys, here's pshat. Maybe it didn't ripen at all. It didn't grow a third of its growth. But since the land can go ahead and bring things quickly, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, they brought it quickly, and therefore they brought it, but not that they were able to ascertain that it grew a third of its growth or not. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that they grew. So that remains a question. So in other words, you have no raya from there. That from the third, you have no raya from there. So Rav Yirmiyah's blitz that he got from the Omer is not acceptable to prove unequivocally that it grew a third of its growth.
Wait. Why can't, when they took over the land, and it grew a third. Once they take over the possession, it's theirs. So therefore, whatever it grew,
not if it grew a third of its growth in the hands of the goyim.
Not the fact that they took over.
Retroactive. A third, wherever it grew. So the Gemara is asking. So maybe it didn't ripen at all. They got the land, and then miraculously something happened. Not that it grew a third of its growth. Okay, anyway. This was all predicated upon the following raya, guys. That above we said Osif is Kitzir, that there's a cutting that you're going to harvest a crop that grew a third of its growth in the year of, it grew a third of its growth in the Shemitah year, and you're going to cut it in Sukkot, right? That was the raya. Says the Gemara, what's your raya over there? It says, this pasuk we learned in Masechta. This was a crucial pasuk. You might remember from Masechta Sukkah. What did it teach us? This is the pasuk that teaches us what the criteria is for stach. Ba'asbecha from the psoilis migarcha of your threshing floors, and from your wine presses. So it's not speaking about the food; it's speaking about the psoilis. So we ascertained over here that schach has to be something that's gedulim min haaretz, but it's not mekabel tumah because it's not an oichel, right? That's what we learned from here. We're speaking about that. So let's see the kasha. Rashi explains the kasha. V'omamar, 2 lines down. Shalamedcha akosiv, the Tosaf is teaching us, lasei schach shel sukkah b'psoilus goyim v'yekiv, to make the schach and a sukkah from the refuse of the threshing floor and the wine press. Kigoin koshin uzmoiros, like the kash, the straw, uzmoiros, and the stuff that comes out of the twigs that comes out of the grapes. Dover she'im makabel tuma, because it's not an oichel. However, v'gedulim min haaretz. V'hai chag osif nami deka'armit. And you wanted to say the word chag osif is extra, and it's telling me that it means katsira. Yiseruhu mishum dechsiv gabi be'osva as masecha lab yiseruhu. It's not extra. The chag osif is not extra. Elazeu shem chag. It's called chag osif. Al shem she'asuka mesuchenes b'pseidos gayim v'yekev. Right. So you read the pasuk. The chag osif, the chag that is osif. That's the name of sukkos. Why? Because it is the chag that is created by the gathering of the pseilis. So memela, if the chag osif is not extra, you can't darshan as ketzir, and then we don't have a source whatsoever for growing a shlish in the 7th year, going into the 8th year. Okay, so l'chayra, what happened? You thought you had a good source for the shlish. It grew a shlish in the 7th year, and it extends into the 8th year. Comes along with Zera and Eskaval Gakasha. The Chag Osif can't mean Katzir. Chag Osif is the name of Yontif. You said Ba'ospecha was extra. It wasn't extra. It was there to teach me a big halacha of what exactly constitutes schach. So Chag Osif that you go ahead and gather. What are you gathering? You're gathering the ospecha for your schach. So therefore, now back to square one. Says the Gemara. It's a very funny lashon. Amr Zera says Zera, Havi biyadon. This limud we had in our hands from this 7th to 8th year. For us, Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina comes along asking this kasha from Schach, and Shada Beinarga, he threw an axe into it, meaning he slugged up the whole thing. So we're back to square one. We're back to yesterday's daf. How do you know a shlish, guys? And you can't give me a raya from Sukkot because there is no Osif Ktsir extra. Your whole raya was an Osif Ktsir. It's not extra. It's there to teach me the name of the Chag. Ella Lashon Charatim. We know that a shlish of its growth. Kidatanya. Rabbi Yonasan and Yosef Reimer. Rabbi Yonasan, the son of Yosef, says, "V'asta es atfua l'shalosh hashanim." It says regarding Shemitah, it's going to go ahead and make tfua for 3 years: the 6th year, the 7th year, and the beginning of the 8th year, right? Because you have to plant in the 8th year, right? V'as that tfua l'shalosh hashanim. Amid beis al tikrei l'shalosh. Don't read for 3 years. Ela l'shlish. It'll grow a third. Really, it's, in other words, it's not going to be for a 3 years, but it'll be sha'asta kashir b'shlish bishula. It'll be when it's a third of its growth. So this is a remez or an allusion to what, or maybe a full lima. I'm not sure that the shlish it's a third of its growth. When we boil the gufay, everything more you need it for itself to teach me that the Hakadosh Baruch Hu is going to provide for 3 years. And for the Gemara, no, kasiv krachrina. I have another pasuk that shows me Hakadosh Baruch Hu will provide for 3 years. It says uzuratem es hashona hashminis. You'll plant in the 8th year. V'achaltem in atfu yoshen al hashana tshis. You'll eat from the old crop until the 9th year. Now, what are you eating from? Are you eating for Shemitah, guys? No. What are you eating from? You're eating from the 6th year. So if you're eating it until the 9th, you're eating the crop to the 9th year, obviously the 6th year must have produced enough. So I don't need it for itself. So I need it to tell me sholish, al tikri sholish, al shlish, to teach me that locha, that if it grows a third of its growth. Okay. Now, guys, this is tefillah. This is tefillah. Okay, anyway, this is interesting. I'll tell you why. Tefillah is chayiv in Meiser Deraisa. We said yesterday, Dagon Tirosh for Yitzhar. The only thing that's chayev in Truma and Meiser Deraisa is Dagon, the 5 grains. For Yitzhar is anavim or wine. Tirosh is anavim or wine. For Yitzhar is shemen or olives. That's the chayev. So here we needed a source for a third of its growth because the Chacham can't make it up. So there had to be a source from the Torah. So the Gemara asked them Rani Mili. We thought it was Sukkis. We thought it was Hakel. We thought it was, but you're right. And now it's telling you, no, it's Shemitah. We're learning from the third of its growth. So that's important. Minani Mili. So it's not an allusion to, it's not an asmachta, but this is the source for halacha, what is considered Gemar Pri, at which point in time are you mechuyev? At which point in time are you mechuyev to go, that it's mechuyev in Chumas Maisa, because it's considered a Pri. So now we have a source for a third of its growth. Conversely, as we continue in the Gemara, Yerokos or spices, which are all the Rabbanon, they're the Rabbanon, it's up to them to ascertain what exactly is a third of its Gemar Pri. So the big chilek, this third is the Deraisa Tikadin, because you're dealing with Deraisa Tika substances. So that's the Gemara Vaita. Tran Hasam. Ha'oireis, that's rice. Va'adoichin, it's millet. These are all kidneys. V'haparogim is poppies. That's art skull taich. V'ashumshim is sesames. Shehishrishu lifnei Rosh Hashanah, that took root before Rosh Hashanah. So now we have another level. Until now we saw 2. We saw shlish of its growth, or we said basa lakita, and we saw ilan basa chanata. And now we're saying these legumes, we're going basa hashrasha after it's taking root. Mis'ashin l'sha'avar, they're going to be the year that passed. In other words, that's going to be the year that passed. Umutarim b'shvius, and they be mut in the shvita year, because since they took root in the 6th year, it's a 6-year crop, not a shmita crop. V'im lav, but if it doesn't take root in the 6th year, only the 7th year, asurim b'shvius, umis'asrim l'shana haba, and in a year that's not a shmita year, then you go after the next year. In the shmita year, it's part of Chumas Maisa. So therefore, in the year that's not a Shemitah year, you would go after what? The year that's going on. Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbanon, Elon basa chanata. Okay, and Elon, we know we go after the chanata, Machloikis, Reish Shammai Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, Rosh Hashanah Lilanos is Reish Chodesh. We pass him like Beis Hillel, Tu B'Shvat, right? So therefore, that's Rosh Hashanah. You go after, if the chanata takes place before Tu B'Shvat, it's the past year. If the chanata takes place after Tu B'Shvat, it's the next year. Tvua v'zeisim, tvua dagon, v'zeisim, basa shlish. As we just said, you go after the shlish, and the source is the shmita. Yerek, basa lakita. Yes, yerek you go after. Again, this is the rabbanon. You go after when it is gathered in. So hani keman shivi rabbanon. The rabbanon, like obviously that oireis, doichin, progim, these legumes and shumshimin, these are all the rabbanon. Where did the rabbanon come up with the shear of hashrasha? What was wrong with Lakita? What was wrong with Shlish? What was wrong with Lakita? Why Dafka Shrasha? In other words, there must have been a reason behind it that they didn't go with some of the other previous things that they had made, or just like those were made, why would they make this? Why did they go after Shrasha over here? What's unique about Shrasha over here? So Hada Amar Rabbi says, Mitoich she'asuyim prachim. Since when you go ahead and you harvest them and you put them together, they begin to crumble up. They begin to crumble up. In other words, if you do Lakita on these at different times, as you do Lakita, you're taking them in at different times, they begin to crumble. You're going to have a mixture over here. If you go after Lakita, you're going to have a mixture of Chadash and Yashan. It's going to be all mixed together. So we had to come up to a universal time. The universal time would be when it takes root. You can't go after Lakita. You can't go after Chanat, it seems there is no blooming. You can't go, the only other time to go after is Lakita when you harvest it. But harvesting, when you harvest it, it doesn't go universal. And therefore, after, let's say you put it in a box and you're putting the harvest time of this time and this time, as you harvest it, it crumbles up. So therefore, they came up with a much more universal time. You know what time we're going to go after? It's the Rabbanan. When it takes root. That will ascertain exactly when the year is. If it takes root before Tishrei or after Tishrei. Taking root will be the thing. Taking root will be the equivalent of Shlish by Tfua and the equivalent of Lakita by Yerapis. That's why we did it, because, of course, the Mitzias, in the physical Mitzias of it, will be difficult to go ahead and go after Lakita, which Pashtus you should go after Lakita. That's what the Gemara says. And Lashon Prachim means crumbling. It has not crumbling. Is not the Gemara pre. It's still Kita. But the Prachim, it just makes it more difficult to go ahead and ascertain which is which. Now, Amalei Abaya, v'yitzbar gronoi l'saychai. Why don't you go ahead and make it shalent? Take everything, mix it all together. V'nimsa torim min achadash shaboy ala chadash shaboy, min hayashin shaboy ala yashin shaboy. In other words, forget about breira. If you take something, an old crop and a new crop, you mix it very, very well. When you're going to shade up, when you separate apart, that part that you separate will be what? Will be respective of the yashan in there and the chadash in there. So you would have taken off both. So why do you have to go after what? After Ashrasha, go after Lakita. But you put it all together. One's chadash, one's yashan, and it's going to be mixed together. After size, let it be mixed together. I still can take it off. Where do you see if something's mixed together, you can take it off? From the following brisa. Milay Tanya, do we not learn on a brisa? Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur oimem mishum Rabbi Shimon Shazuri. Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur said the name of Shimon Shazuri. Pula mitzri, that's a type of Egyptian bean, obviously a kitnius. Shezaroi. Now you can go ahead and plant it for two reasons. Shezaroi lizera. Right? You planted it for the person of its seed. Miktsasei hishrus l'fnei Rosh Hashanah, or miktsasei hishrus l'achar Rosh Hashanah. So now, in terminu ma'asim mizeh al zeh, l'fi shein terminu ma'asim leimin hachadash al yashem leimin yashem al chadash. So if you have them separate, right, it seems that it doesn't crumble together. If you have these things separate, you can't take one off the other. Ketzadu oisa, what do you do? So again, obviously, you guys are going after Lakita, correct? It's no, actually going after Shrasha. You're going after Shrasha. But what did they do? Ketzadu oisa, soiber gornoi l'saychai. They went ahead and they mixed it together. Menimsa, Torah v'maisim and achadash shabai l'chadash shabai, and yashin shabai al yashin shabai. Right? So l'chayra, you're able to go ahead and do that. Says Rashi, Ketzadu oisa, where it gets wide about 4 lines down. They with matriach to put one pul mitzri before Rosh Hashanah and one after Rosh Hashanah together. And Sarber going to l'saycha yivlu l'say yafe. You mixed it well together. La'acha shenasan la'acha shenasan min arishaim b'zav yasu min asheni b'zav yasu. After you put one in one corner and one in the other corner, you put one in one corner, one in the other corner. You mixed it in the middle of the threshing floor. So the Gemara answers, I'll tell you why we didn't say this. This goes according to the Yama back inside. Right? Amalei Rav Shimon Shazuri comment. We tell you Rav Shimon Shazuri Saba Yesh Bila. He holds it's possible to mix something very well together. Rabbanan Savri Ein Bila. And the Rabbanan say Ein Bila. So therefore, they didn't give the option of doing this because they didn't hold it mixes well together. Rashi says, Ein Soimchem al Kach. Sheyesh Leimer Loi Nivul Yafa. It didn't get mixed together well. In other words, and then when you separate, most is going to be from one or the other, and it would not be taken off correctly. Okay. So Amar Yisab Nachman Shmuel Halacha Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur Shamim Mishum Missouri. The halachas like Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur Shem Missouri pashas that you say Yesh Bila, then you could mix it together. I'll see Bez Hashem on Motzei Shabbos the rest. So Bez Hashem everyone have a good